Sean Franklin
and Nicole Smith
from Blood and Iron Martial Arts.
We're here today to talk to you a little bit about the rapier.
To start off with, what is a rapier?
Well, the truth is, it's kind of hard to say. The rapier evolved out of the late period sidesword, and it's kind of hard to tell where one finished and one began.
As the sword was adopted for civilian use, and with improvements in metallurgy, the blade became longer and thinner. This increased the range of the thrust, however, it had a much lower cutting potential.
And as the blade was changing, so was the hilt. They became increasingly complex and offered greater protection for the hand. And as this was a civilian weapon, and people wore these all the time, they kind of became a bit of a fashion statement.
Even sidesword is a modern term, and we usually use it to differentiate swords which have a much higher cutting potential than your typical 17th century rapier.
Even historically, there was no clear naming convention. Joachim Meyer uses rapier to describe a sword system that would clearly be called sidesword by our modern definitions.
So, you never be sure, but it is a quick rule of thumb. If the sword or sword system favors cuts to the body, it's probably a sidesword. If, however, the targets for effective cuts are limited to arms, legs, head, then you're probably looking at a rapier.
As you probably already know, the rapier is a thrust-oriented weapon.
We see a lot of fighting from point-forward positions, moving around until you can get an advantage on your opponent.
Naturally, you want to be safe while attacking your opponent, and we'll do this by constraining your opponent's sword before coming in for your lunge.
However, there are lots of historical accounts when people did not heed this advice.
Naturally, your opponent is going to be trying to constrain you, or at the very least, prevent you from constraining them.
One of the main tools in the rapier fighter's bag of tricks is the disengage.
Seems like a pretty simple thing, moving your sword from one side to the other, and it is. But the key is to keep it as small a motion as possible, reacquire constrainment on the other side, before delivering your thrust.
We started off talking about the cut. And while it's not what the rapier is known for, it's still a sword. It can still cut. Now, using the rapier, you're looking for structures that are closer to the surface, arteries, tendons, muscle groups. So this tends to make your targets things like legs, neck, or arm.
Now, typically, you would land these higher up on the blade and have a drawing or cutting element to them, typically to make up for the rapier's lack of cutting ability. Also, too, cutting tended to be more of a follow-up after your thrust had been knocked offline.
There's lots of different types of rapier fighting. Even just take a look at the offhand.
There are many ways you can use your offhand with the rapier. You can use your hand to just parry the sword, you can use it with a dagger. Heck, there were even out there information using it with your cloak.
And looking at the different masters, we see many different fighting styles. The two most common ones were the Italian, which focused on linear attacks delivered with a lunge, or the Spanish, which focused on working in on your opponent in a circular pattern.
The rapier begins to appear in 16th century Italy and eventually spreads throughout Europe to become the most popular weapon of the 17th century.
There's a lot of different masters and a lot of different treatises. We've tried to sum up some of the similarities that are the most common, but then again, there's always masters that buck the trend completely.
But for now, we hope you've enjoyed learning a little more what sword fighting actually looked like.
Alright, a big thanks to all of our Patreon supporters.
For our 1 thumbs up supporters.
And the 2 thumbs up supporters. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out our Patreon extended content.